Next up, your New York Football Giants. Minus 158 net points. General Manager Joe, is it Sean?
It's Shane.
Shane. Joe Shane. Head coach Brian Daboll. Offensive coordinator Mike Kafka. Defensive coordinator Don Martindale. Special teams coach Thomas McGaughey. MCGAUGHEY and quarterback Daniel Jones. All right, I'm not going to tread on any of your GM stuff. You go any of your Giant stuff, I should say. Go have at it. What you got on these guys?
I've kind of been starting with the quarterback, so I'll start with Daniel Jones. I'll tell you, I'm a Giants fan. I'm not happy with how Daniel Jones has played the last couple seasons, but I can't fully fault him. And when the owner of the team actually comes out and says, hey, we haven't done Daniel Jones any favors in setting up this team and trying to build this team around him, I have to give the guy a little bit of slack. I'm hoping that this brain trust can get things going, and I'm pretty confident that they will. First of all, the general manager and the head coach come from the Buffalo Bills, which is my favorite AFC team, a team that I think has been very well organized and very well run for the last couple of seasons. Joe Shane was the assistant GM with the Bills. He is now the GM for the Giants. He also worked as a scout and a scouting director for the Panthers and the Dolphins. So he's been around for a little while. Head coach is Brian Daboll. He was a longtime offensive coordinator with a lot of teams, recently with the Bills, but he also was the offensive coordinator for the Browns, Dolphins, and Chiefs back some years ago. He also worked as the offensive coordinator for the University of Alabama a few years ago. If I'm not mistaken, he might have been there when Tua and Jalen Hurts were there.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe so. He also was an offensive assistant for Bill Belichick in New England for many, many years. So he's got a nice resume and comes from good stock there, as you might want to say. His offensive coordinator, and him just coming from being an offensive coordinator, I would think he would know what he wants in an offensive coordinator. That would be Mike Kafka. Now, here's funny thing I found out about Mike Kafka. When I read his name, I started thinking, I've heard that name before. He was a journeyman quarterback in the NFL for like 6 seasons. He was drafted by the Eagles back in 2010, and he bounced around to a whole bunch of different teams. In 2018, he was hired as the quarterback coach for the Chiefs, and he helped nurture Patrick Mahomes to an MVP season and then a Super Bowl season. He was there for both of those, yes. So Danny Dimes is in good hands. He's in good hands. The DC is Don, nicknamed Wink Martindale. I think you've heard of Wink Martindale. Longtime linebacker coach and defensive coordinator for the Ravens. And before that, he was a linebacker coach for the Raiders and the Broncos. And he was part of the 2018 Super Bowl champion Ravens. That's a nice brain trust. I feel good about those guys as a Giants fan. I expect the team to improve, and I especially expect Daniel Jones to improve. He's got some good mentors there to work with. Big additions. Probably the biggest addition will be Tyrod Taylor. Believe it or not, we've talked about Tyrod Taylor quite a bit in previous shows. At this point, a career backup, but he's also a career type of backup that can actually come in and win a game for you if it's necessary. He comes from the Chargers, and Mike Lewinsky is an offensive lineman from the Colts. I think he plays guard and tackle. They also got another lineman from the Bills, John Feliciano, who also plays guard and tackle to shore up the offensive line for Daniel Jones. Good additions.
Now, Ben, you skipped over the losses. You lost.
No, I didn't skip over. I was going to do that next.
Oh, okay. All right.
The additions first. The losses are Evan Ingram, a guy who's never lived up to his potential. Logan Ryan, a pretty good safety who I will miss. Kyle Rudolph, a guy that's on his last leg, and James Bradbury at corner, who I hated like hell to lose, and especially hated to losing to the Eagles. The Bradbury move, from where everything I've read, seemed to be a money thing. They were having cap trouble, and they had to unload him. And other teams knew they had to unload him, or they had to unload somebody, possibly him. And when they put him up for trade, nobody would bite because they knew they had to unload his contract. So they just waited. Sucks. What are you gonna do? Now, the draft. That grade A-, is that from Pro Football Focus?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, I agree with it 100%. Kayvon Thibodeau is a great number 1 pick. He was a stud pass rusher, which they obviously needed, among other things. He will come in, start right away, and wreak havoc right away. Evan Neal, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Obviously, they need offensive linemen. That's been the Giants' weakness for the last 4 or 5 seasons. If I'm not mistaken, Evan Neal, of the offensive linemen that went early in the draft, is one of the better run blockers, which would be good for Saquon. Wan'Dale Robinson. I didn't see a whole lot of film on him, but what I found out about him is he's a wide receiver, rushing and receiving threat, a la Deebo Samuel. Yes, that's the little tidbit that I got on him. So I'll be looking out for Wan'Dale Robinson. In the 3rd round, they got Joshua Azadu. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but he seems to be listed as an underrated offensive guard. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. All in all, I think the Giants will be improved. Supposedly, when we looked at the schedule, their schedule is on the weaker side. I'm looking for 6, 7, possibly 8 wins. I know that's asking a lot, but I think we're going to surprise some people.
So you think you can come out 500 for the season, eh?
Yeah.
That would be good. That would be good. Going from,
that would be tremendous.
If you can get the break even on the net point power rankings, that'd be something.
I'd be super happy.
That'd be a big move. That'd be a big move. All right, next up, let's see. The Atlanta Falcons with minus 146 net points. Their GM is Terry Fontenot, head coach Arthur Smith, offensive coordinator Dean Pease, defensive coordinator Dave Ragone, special teams coordinator Marquise Williams, quarterback Marcus Mariota.
Oh, Marcus Mariota. He's been around for a little while. I remember when Marcus Mariota first came out of Oregon, and Chip Kelly was with the Eagles. And all I kept thinking was, if Chip Kelly gets Marcus Mariota, this could be a problem. Well, he didn't get him. He still brought his offense to the Eagles. And the results of that weren't very good. But anyway, Marcus Mariota's been around. Hasn't been able to hold on to a starting job very long. But right now, where he is with the Falcons is where he's really, really needed, because he's replacing Matt Ryan. Old Matty Ice has finally left the Falcons, and Marcus Mariota now has his own show to run. The GM is Terry Fontenot. He was a scout, a director of scouting, and an assistant GM with the Saints. So the Falcons hired him away from the Saints to be their GM.
Same division, eh?
In the same division, yes. Being an assistant GM, I'm sure helped. Head coach is Arthur Smith. You may remember hearing Arthur Smith's name a lot when you're watching games. The crazy thing is, this is his first head coaching job. He's been with the Titans since 2011 as an assistant coach, and is the offensive coordinator between 2011 and now. So he will be the head coach there. I'm sorry, the offensive coordinator, the head coach there. I'm sorry. Got my names mixed up. The offensive coordinator is Dave Ragone. He's been a wide receiver and quarterback coach for the Titans, the Washington Commanders. Well, I'll just say Washington since they just became the Commanders, and the Bears. He became the offensive coordinator for the Falcons just last season. So he's got a year under his belt there with the Falcons. And the defensive coordinator is Dean Pease. This guy is the definition of a football lifer. This guy's been all over and done everything. He's had various jobs as a position coach or coordinator at several colleges. He was a linebacker coach and defensive coordinator with the Patriots from 2004 to 2009 and with the Ravens from 2010 to 2017. He was defensive coordinator with the Titans last season. And
Are we talking about Dean Pease here?
We're talking about Dean Pease, yes.
I have him listed as an offensive coordinator.
Oh, I'm sorry. I knew I had mixed something. I put the names in the right order and I'm sorry. Dean Pease is the defensive coordinator. And I should have called myself when I'm looking at Dave Ragone being a wide receiver and quarterback coach. Yes, Dave Ragone, I'm sorry, is the offensive coordinator. Dean Pease is the defensive coordinator.
All right, so I have it backwards.
That's okay. That's what messed me up then. I'm sorry about that. I should have caught that.
Okay. So
but anyway, Dean
we'll make the correction.
Has been around forever.
Dean Pease is the defensive coordinator. Dave Ragone is the offensive coordinator.
Yes.
All right.
Those are going to be big additions for the Falcons. Both of those guys are veteran coordinators, veteran offensive and defensive coaches. Of course, getting Mariota to be really better is going to take some time. They're going to have to build around him. They didn't get any really big additions. Did they re-sign Cordarrelle Patterson? I'm not sure.
Biggest addition signing, Cordarrelle Patterson.
Okay, so they were able to keep him. They got Mariota. They got a nice corner away from the Chargers, Casey Hayward.
Yeah.
That'll help. Obviously, losing Matt Ryan after such a long time, while it seems like he can still play, is going to seem like a bad loss. But it remains to be seen how this brain trust and how Mariota work out together. Losing Russell Gage isn't that big a deal, I don't think. He can be replaced. In fact, he's already been replaced. Their first pick in round one, pick number 8, was Drake London, a guy that one of our friends of the show, Mark, said he really, really liked and was hoping would go to the Eagles. Very tall, big target, handles 50-50 balls really well, tough to cover. That's probably their biggest guy out of the draft. These other guys don't really ring too many bells with me. Third round, they got another quarterback. Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati. I like Desmond Ridder. I had him in my top quarterbacks in this class. Obviously, this is what they call a weak quarterback class. He will probably be the quarterback of the future. And if Mariota doesn't watch out and they let this guy compete for the job, that could be a problem for Mariota. I don't know.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. And then they have D'Angelo Malone, linebacker out of Western Kentucky, finishing up round 3 there. So, all right. So that's the Atlanta Falcons. Man. Next up, the Detroit Lions with minus 142 net points. General manager, Ray Agnew. Assistant general manager, no GM listed. Head coach, Dan Campbell. Offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. Special teams coordinator, Dave Phipp. and quarterback Jared Goff. What's the second year for Goff, right?
Yes, this will be the second year for Goff with the Lions. Yes, it will.
Lions.
And here we go. They do now, in fact, have a general manager. He was just hired a couple of days ago. His name is Brad Holmes.
All right.
Brad Holmes held various executive roles with the Rams from 2003 to 2020. In fact, being hired just last year, he's the guy that engineered the Matt Stafford trade.
Really?
Really. So we'll see how he does in rebuilding the Detroit Lions. Their head coach is Dan Campbell, and obviously a ex-player who started his coaching career as an interim coach with the Dolphins, became a tight end coach, and eventually the interim head coach with the Dolphins in 2015. So most of his time has been as a coach has been spent with the Miami organization.
That's interesting.
He became the assistant head coach and tight end coach for the Saints in 2016 and held that position until 2020 and then was hired by the Lions. His offensive coordinator is Ben Johnson, who worked alongside him with the Dolphins, so they know each other well. Makes sense that Dan Campbell would hire a guy that he's worked with and bring him over as his offensive coordinator. He was an offensive assistant when he was with Miami. The DC is Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn actually played in the NFL also. A lot of these guys are players. Some of them I made notes that they played, some I didn't. Aaron actually played. He was a DB in the NFL. He played for the Jets, Texans, and the Cowboys back in the day. I think he spent some time with the Jaguars and the Saints too. But he's been a DB coach with the Browns and the Saints before the Lions hired him away and made him the defensive coordinator. So he's been around defenses playing and coaching. Let me see. What do we got here? Additions. There's that DJ Shark name again. Okay, we'll take that. I don't know that DJ Shark is going to be such a big deal as an addition for their wide receiver core. Their wide receiver core has Amon St. Brown on it, who blew up last season, even with Jared Goff being his quarterback. Jared Goff is not a guy that I love, obviously, you can tell. But he made the best. Amon St. Brown made the best of Jared Goff and looked really good doing it. And they also picked up Jameson Williams, who I spoke of earlier as the wide receiver out of Alabama. They got him in the first round. He's pick number 12. He will probably start right away, along with the number 1 pick, Aiden Hutchinson, defensive end out of Michigan. Josh Paschal should be a good pass rusher out of Kentucky. He was rated very high. Kirby Joseph, I don't know a whole lot about. James Mitchell, okay, we're getting down the list here. But Hutchinson and Williams are going to add on right away. They're going to work really well with the Lions right away.
Awesome. Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, there. Next up, moving right along, we are now at minus 100 net points with the Carolina Panthers. General Manager Scott Fitterer, head coach Matt Rule, offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo. When I hear that name, I always think basketball. Defensive coordinator Phil Snow, special teams coordinator Chris Tabor, and quarterback they have listed as Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I don't know if Sam Darnold's going to be able to hold on to that job or not. I tell you, man, Sam Darnold, oh gosh, his career's really been rough right out of the gate. But the GM is Scott Fitterer. Scott Fitterer has held various scouting and executive positions for a couple different teams, the Giants and the Seahawks, before being hired by the Panthers to become their GM. And you'll start to notice that when we talk about a lot of these GMs, they actually started their professional careers as scouts or in the scouting department and maybe even moved up to director of scouting or player personnel type jobs.
That's an interesting point, and I don't
Yes,
want to just
that's
go
just
past that, because for anyone who's watching, who's thinking about, how to move up, or, how this thing works within the NFL, that's a good point. Your GMs are coming from your scouting positions.
right. Almost every single one started as a scout,
Wow.
and then eventually took over the scouting department and then moved on from there. The head coach is Matt Rule. Matt Rule's been around a little while. People in Philadelphia know Matt Rule as being the coach at Temple University at one time. Matt Rule, I believe, is a very good coach, but he's going to have a tough time with the Panthers. He's got a lot of work to do. He hired as his offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, who had a pretty disastrous time as the head coach of the Giants. I was glad to see him go. Head coaching, I don't think, is going to be his thing, but he may do well there as the offensive coordinator. He's worked with several teams. He's worked for the 49ers, the Packers, and the Saints as an offensive line coach and as a quarterback coach with the Packers, I believe. I believe he was quarterback coach for Rodgers at one time. When he left the Packers, he became the offense coordinator for Giants and then became the head coach in 2016. But again, he was fired after one season. Defensive coordinator is Phil Snow. Phil Snow, another football lifer, coached DBs or was a defensive coordinator for various high schools and colleges from 1976 to 2004. This guy is not a young fella. He's been around, extensive resume. Unfortunately, his only NFL experience was with the Lions from 2005 to 2008. And he worked with Matt Rule at Temple, which is probably why Matt Rule hired him, because he's familiar with him. I don't know how that's going to work, or if that's going to work really well. Having only a few years as a coach in the NFL, and most of his career has been spent in high school and college. But we will see. Matt Rule trusts him, so we'll have to wait and see how that works out. Biggest additions. Oh, they re-signed DJ Moore. Good move. Good move signing DJ Moore to an extension. Dante Jackson, good pickup at cornerback. Biggest loss, Hassan Reddick leaving. Hassan Reddick's a linebacker. He left. He's with the Eagles now. And they lost Stephon Gilmore to the Colts. I don't know how they did it. He just got there.
Yeah.
They just signed him away from New England, and now he's gone already. So I don't know what's going on there. Their draft. Oh, Ike Ekwonu. I like him. Very good offensive lineman. He'll probably come in and start at O-tackle for them right away, possibly left tackle. That would be good for Darnold. But what's bad for Darnold is they went out and got a quarterback in round 3, Matt Corral. He was listed among the top quarterbacks in a weak quarterback draft, as I said before. But
in quotation marks, ladies and gentlemen, just in case you didn't, you're listening, a week in quotation marks.
Yes. Matt Corral could possibly make some noise down there, especially if Darnold doesn't play well.
All right. And didn't have a lot of picks for a team that's still struggling. Nothing in the second round. They had one in the first, one in the 3. And after that, not a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think they traded away some picks to get a couple players in some previous years.
Yeah, you pay now and you pay later.
Exactly.
You pay now and you pay later. The Washington Commanders. Told you I was going to say it like that every time.
Oh, God.
Minus 99 net points. General Manager Martin Mayhew. Head Coach Ron Rivera. Offensive Coordinator Scott Turner. Defensive Coordinator Jack Del Rio. Special Teams Coach Nate Kaxer. And quarterback Carson Wentz.
Okay, now, right after I said most of these GMs came up through scouting departments and what have you. Here's one that's different. Martin Mayhew was actually a player in the NFL. He played for Washington, the old Washington Redskins, and won a Super Bowl with them. He was on the team, Super Bowl 2016. He also played for the Buccaneers. So that's interesting. Homegrown general manager up through the player ranks. That's a little different. Head coach Ron Rivera. He was a former defensive coordinator, linebacker coach with a few teams, the Eagles, Bears, and Chargers. And he also was a former player. And he was also a former head coach with the Panthers. That didn't work out too well with it for him, but he seems to be doing a lot better in Washington. His offensive coordinator is Scott Turner, longtime quarterback coach and offensive assistant for the Panthers, Browns, and the Vikings. You'll notice sometimes these head coaches and their coordinators have worked along the way together on different teams. And that's why these guys bring them along, because they're familiar with each other and with each other's philosophies. Turner's also been OC with the Commanders since 2020. And the DC is Jack Del Rio, also a former player, also a former head coach with the Jaguars and the Raiders. And he's been with the Commanders since 2020. So here we have a brain trust where from the GM to the head coach to the OC and the DC were all former players. I don't think we'll see this again. I don't think we'll see this again at all, to tell you the truth. I would venture to guess if we do, I'll definitely make note of it. But I saw right away, this was kind of crazy. This is really out of the normal. All former players in all these positions.
Wow.
And not to mention former head coaches also.
Yeah.
In Rivera and Del Rio.
Well, that's what happens. Former head coaches get coordinator jobs.
Right. That is true. That does happen. Now I don't want to say too much about Carson Wentz. I'll say one thing that I think everybody will agree with. This is probably Carson Wentz's last chance. This may be his last stop as a starting quarterback. If he's going to continue his NFL career after this and he doesn't do well here, I don't know. I can't see anybody else bring him on via trade or free agency to be a starter. But you never know. I just don't see it. Re-signing J.D. McKissick was big for the Commanders. He's a good running back. Brandon Scherf is going to be a big loss. He's that five-time Pro Bowler I talked about. Landon Collins, they're going to miss him at safety. He's a former Giant. I think he's still got some years left in him. And Matt Leonidas was a decent defensive lineman. Not a big deal. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a very big deal. Here's their big deal. First round pick, Jahan Dotson. I love Jahan Dotson. He's out of Penn State, wide receiver. He's going to help them right away. Jahan Dotson. Wentz can't mess this up. Well, I shouldn't say this, should I? That's about it. Brian Robinson Jr. might have a chance at running back. Their running back situation is kind of up in the air. They've had a lot of injuries there. And McKissick is basically a third down back. Their starter was Gibson. He's pretty banged up. So Brian Robinson has a shot to compete for that job. He was their third round pick.
All right. So those are the roster changes for, was it Commanders, right?
Right.
Yeah. Questionable quarterback choice there as far as I'm concerned. Let's go to the Chicago Bears. The Bears at minus 96 net points. GM Ryan Poles, head coach Matt Eberflus, Offensive coordinator Luke Getzey, defensive coordinator Alan Williams, special teams coordinator Richard Hightower, and quarterback Justin Fields going into his second year, the sophomore Fields. What do you think?
Okay, I've been kind of speaking on the quarterbacks first, so I'll look at Justin Fields. Excuse me, I like Justin Fields. I believe that the Bears like Justin Fields. I like the way they handled him last year, even though there was some chaos between him and the old head coach, which he got fired. So, you know, I believe they're going to try to work with Justin Fields, make him their quarterback of the future, and build around him, which I think is a good idea. The general manager is Ryan Poles. He was the scouting coordinator and director of scouting for Kansas City from 2009 to 2021. So he knows his way around building a team. That's good for the Chicago Bears. The head coach is Matt Eberflus. He served as a linebacker coach for the Browns and the Cowboys before becoming a defensive coordinator for the Colts, and worked for the Colts between 2018 and 2021. He is the new head coach. A defensive head coach, which I think is, I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm a little curious when you have a young quarterback like that they went after a defensive-minded head coach. But hey, that was their choice. The offensive coordinator, who's going to be very important because he has to work with Justin Fields, is Luke Getzey. Now, he was an offensive coordinator and a position coach. He was quarterback and wide receiver coach for several college programs before joining Green Bay Packers as an offensive quality control coach. I'm not exactly sure what quality control coaches do. He was also a wide receiver coach from 2014 to 2017. He got his first major college offensive coordinator job in 2018 at Mississippi State. And then he came back to Green Bay in 2019 as the quarterback coach until last season. That's when he, came over to the Bears as their offensive coordinator. The DC is Alan Williams. He's a DB coach. He was a DB coach for the Buccaneers and the Colts. He was also a defensive coordinator for the Vikings from 2012 to 2013, so he has experience. Then he went back to being a DB coach for the Lions and the Colts, and then he came over to the Bears as defensive coordinator again, so he's got experience. Additions, probably the biggest addition may be Byron Pringle. He's an underrated wide receiver that came over from the Chiefs. Biggest loss is definitely Khalil Mack. No doubt about it, the defense will miss him. And Allen Robinson, a number one wide receiver. No doubt about it. Losing him is going to be big. I don't think Pringle can fill those shoes. I really don't.
Let me mention real quick, since we had a quick pause, a quality control coach. Primary job is preparing the team for a game beginning sometimes 2 or 3 weeks before the game. Duties include preparing the game by analyzing game film for statistical analysis.
There, he's the analytics guy. The analytics guy, gotcha. Yeah, that means he also breaks down film so that it's easier for the players to watch.
There you go. There you go.
Picks out strengths and weaknesses.
You know anything about Mr. Jones, the wide receiver in round 3? I kind of remember that name for some reason, but I'm not quite sure.
Round 3.
Velus Jones Jr.
Velus Jones Jr. Tennessee. I think he had a good 40 time.
That's what I think. It was kind of in the back of my mind. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, that's the only thing that jogs my memory.
All right. Ready to move on?
Yes, sir.